Hello, and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and I'm joined by award-winning director Brian Redondo and Savon Jones, aka Captain Vonnie. This is episode 69, and we delight in the bonkersness of The Boys Season 3, and we are proud to bring you another highbrow, Hi Brian, which will have you really thinking about science fiction in film. I'm confident that it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund.
Incredible!
Gentlemen, welcome back to our newest episode of Confidently Wrong. Welcome. Surprise, surprise. Guess who's not here, guys?
Well, Brian's here. Savon's here.
Hey.
Wes is clearly here.
So, who's not here? Mike, where are you, Mike?
Sixth man of the year. The Kyrie Irving of the Confidently Wrong pod.
Wow.
He's almost like the Green Ranger. You know, Power Ranger. Remember the Green Ranger would only like rarely show up?
Yeah.
And granted, when the Green Ranger showed up, it was like a big appearance because they were like, oh, snap, it's the Green Ranger. We getting it in.
Or the White Ranger, right?
Oh, yeah, but I didn't want to just call Mike the White Ranger. I thought about it and I was like, because I don't want to shade him. Like, it's a compliment, Mike, I swear. Being called the Green Ranger, every kid wanted to be the Green Ranger.
It's true. Tommy was the man.
Oh, yeah. So do we see you often? Maybe not, but when he comes, boy, the gravitas and the weight and presence is there. So today isn't one of those days. Can't wait to see you next time, big baby.
All right, we'll get Mike back on this show at some point soon.
He's out being a good friend, being supportive, and doing weddings and stuff.
Oh, yeah, he's doing something
We
important.
give him a hard time, but it's all love.
All right, he's got an actual social life and actual commitments that he's got to do. All right, on this episode, we are going to talk about The Boys Season 3. It actually kind of snuck up on me. I saw some previews a few weeks ago, but I didn't realize they were coming out this soon. They actually decided to drop the first 3 episodes already, all at once. At the time we're recording the day or 2 days after they dropped the first 3 episodes. We've actually only watched the first episode, so we'll talk about that. Savon got a little bit ahead. I think Savon watched all 3, so he may drop some spoilers in from the other 2 episodes. But we'll try and stick it to episode 1 only.
I'll censor the spoilers.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about episode 1 with some spoilers there, but I think that's okay given that it's not going to spoil the whole season for anybody, and it's a lot of stuff that we already kind of knew from before. So, pretty dope. The first episode grabs you by the testicles right away.
Oh, man.
By the prostate, and just completely shakes the hell out of you through the whole thing. It was a crazy ride. Talk about commitment to the bit, man. They took the body explosions, body dismantlings, the comedy, the grotesqueness, the gratuitous nudity, and they just continued to dial it up. I mean, they just, a little bit more and a little bit more from previous seasons.
Only home run swings on the boys.
We talked about other shows and other movies sort of feeling like they kind of dabbled, or they kind of felt like they were going in a couple different directions, but the best entertainment, at least on TV and probably in books too, but the best entertainment we've seen has been really the people that have created shows and movies that really just lean in 100% into a feeling or a tone or an aesthetic. We're thinking the Batman sort of had this, at least in the first part of the movie. Peacekeeper and Suicide Squad had this from James Gunn.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of Doctor Strange, right?
Yeah, it really just that like torn nature of Doctor Strange, trying to please a whole bunch of different storylines and people. Just
Brian, why would you bait him like that?
We can't not have
The Boys
an
is a
now.
great counterexample, I think.
And it's not that The Boys is 100% like Oscar-winning, Emmy-winning kind of material here. It's just that it knows what it wants to be. It's not apologetic about it, and it just goes 100% for the throat there. So let's get into it. So far, what has been your reaction to the first episode? What have you thinking in season 3? How is it going for you? Brian, where are you at?
I haven't honestly thought about The Boys in quite some time. And so to just jump right into episode 1 and be inside another man's urethra for a long period of time.
Stroking and caressing it, Brian.
Termite is climbing. Well, not only like in there, like they really set that up. Like, you know, he shrunk down. You see all like the drug paraphernalia giant next to him on the table, shallow depth of field. And oh, what's that in the background? An enormous pee hole. Like, good Lord. And, you know, it's like from a vantage that nobody on Earth has ever seen before. Like, they totally imagined this thing. Like, yes, that's what a pee hole looks like from this angle. And he climbs inside and starts stroking the inside of this man's urethra. And in you know, for sexual pleasure, too. Which, while watching it, I was just like, that's gotta hurt. There's no way that is pleasurable at all. That's as if kidney stones are, you know, sexually gratifying. I don't think anyone has walked away from kidney stones thinking that. But
maybe the cocaine helps. I don't know.
Yeah, cocaine's a hell of a drug. Like,
clearly.
I guess, you know, like sometimes you just got to go to new heights. So, and that's exactly The Boys season 3 in a nutshell so far, in a pea shell. They're really just like going for it. You know, they have to top themselves constantly and bring bigger and bigger set pieces, go wilder and wilder. And so I think, yeah, it was like kind of a rush of excitement. Like, wow, this show is so silly, but smart at the same time. 100% commitment, as you said, Wes. And I know they're setting us up for more. So in episode 1, we get a lot more of Vought's CEO, whose name I don't know. I only know him by Gustavo Fring. And, you know, he's running Vought, and he's trying to get the Department of Defense or the government or whatever to buy into Vought's newest product, a variant of Compound V or whatever that chemical is called.
Compound V.
And so they've got V24 now, which is some sort of chemical that allows its user to get superpowers for only a temporary period. Basically, they want to allow the government to have super soldiers, but to be able to rein them in, right? They won't run amok like the Seven or anything like that because they'll only have temporary powers. So I know that essentially is what's going to pay off later throughout this season. People are going to be trying V24. There's going to be some bonkers powers that come out in ways that are probably really unexpected, and they don't know how to use them. And things just going to, you know, turn into anarchy. And somehow it's all going to remind us of how chaotic and absurd our own socio-political climate here is in the real world. So yeah, I'm glad that The Boys is back.
Savon?
And thinking about just what I've been enjoying most, I think what I enjoy most is, and Wes, again, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, is a lot of superhero media. Naturally, I love a good storyline, good character interactions, but the superhero genre lends itself to really fun action sequences because you have people with these fantastic abilities, right? And part of the entertainment is seeing people do these fights and battles that could never occur in real life. So when you see Avengers Endgame and Justice League type battles, it's just a level of eye candy that other genres by design aren't going to always be able to give you, right? And The Boys is so interesting in that for a show that's so hyper violent, it doesn't make its bones off of action sequences at all. All of what makes The Boys so good is, surprisingly enough, the character interactions and the dialogue and the conversations. And you start to realize that The Boys is a drama more than anything else. And there's really not a lot of superhero sequences happening. There's people getting violently murdered, but they're not really superhero scenes. They're more akin to like a horror movie type scene or like a really adult Comedy Central movie, right? And so I say all that to say what I've been loving most about The Boys is every scene and dialogue between characters has weight to it and has tension to it. And Homelander, as despicable of an antagonist and character he is one of the best characters in anything I've ever watched at just making you uncomfortable with every scene he's in. Because And shout out to Anthony Starr, who's just a sensational actor. Again, a great actor can just take something that's good and make it great. He just makes you uncomfortable. You've seen what he's capable of. You've seen all the awful things that's happened to him. You might have to watch a recap to know just how thrown off he is. But even that scene, where he just decides, okay, I'm unhappy. I'm just gonna psychologically torture everybody who I work with. I'm gonna be the most toxic work member ever. That scene where he grabs A-Train and he starts just like body shaming him. I was like on my couch, physically uncomfortable. Like, oh my God, that's not a superhero action sequence. That's just a superpowered bully threatening somebody because his world's falling apart. And that's really, really captivating entertainment. Again, I say this as like a superhero genre like junkie. This is like the stuff that's driving me in isn't the stuff you'd see normally in a good superhero show.
Well put.
Yeah, it reminds me of Amazon's other show, Invincible, right? Like, I feel like Invincible and The Boys are two sides of the same coin, where they're both really just taking the superhero genre and taking all those tropes and presenting them in ways that you probably haven't thought about, because the MCU is what it is, and so they're showing you different vantage points. And The Boys, it's like, well, there can be superheroes, and here's how awful that could actually be, right? Especially in the type of world that we live in. And we get a lot of, similar things in Invincible. And so I think, like, to me, that, bringing those characters into situations that would never happen in the MCU, but they happen here in The Boys, like the body shaming scene, they take on like so many new layers of significance, because they're just playing with all of our expectations. And by putting it in this like lens of, superpowered individuals where everything is hyper, it just makes it that much more intense.
Boom. The Boys has never been afraid to get graphic, sexually, violently, whatever. Has there been any moments where you've been like taken aback or cringed or smiled or just enjoyed like the complete over the topness of the violence in this show?
Yeah, honestly, and this might feel like a cop-out answer, and maybe it's because I'm desensitized, because I've seen a lot of just like violent stuff, and some make me more uncomfortable than others. The violence in The Boys, as ridiculous as it is, it's so over the top that it's almost how the Peacemaker show was, where it's so over the top that actually makes it have a sense of levity. Yeah. So I think for me, it's just the scenes where someone is in a precarious situation with a soup and they just know this person could kill me at any moment. Like those, it's like more like a lot of the scenes that freak me out more are more psychological now than violent, because now it's the threat of the violence that bothers me more than the actual violence itself. Like, yeah. I would rather Homelander just punch.
Oh, I was saying when he confronted Deep after his TV appearance. Like, you thought, oh, he's about to melt Deep right here in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Or he's going to torture him.
Yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean, watch more of this season and, you'll see some really interesting stuff. But again, a lot of the most, even, and then this isn't like later episode spoilers, but all the moments that made me most uncomfortable weren't because of the violence. It was because of the threat of violence. And it would be, even Homer, like he lit up his eyes at A-Train. Like, it was scarier that he didn't go through it than if he had just done it. Like, if he had killed him, I would have at least had a sense of like, oh, thank God it's over, right? And like, no, he doesn't. You're just like, oh my God. He threatened this, and now he's letting you go, and now you're just going to keep walking on eggshells because you don't know what the hell is going to happen. Like, to me, that's scarier. Like, the threat is scarier than the actual violence itself.
And then when it comes to sexuality, or not sexuality, but sex scenes in the show, they're also they're layered with other stuff, because we know just how sociopathic or messed up all these characters are, in addition to the superpowers that they have. So the one in episode 1 that, kind of like made me cringe and smile at the same time is when it's revealed that Homelander's Nazi girlfriend is still alive. I forget her name. Stormfront.
Yeah,
Stormfront.
Very on the nose.
She's yeah. Stormfront is like, still burnt to a crisp, missing limbs and stuff, in a hospital bed on life support, probably in Homelander's home. And Homelander goes over there. He's griping about how he's being dethroned and declawed and all this stuff. He's losing his stature. And we know from past seasons that he's got some serious mommy issues, and he likes to role play with lovers as his mom, and all sorts of weird stuff like that. So he comes in whining, and with Stormfront, he lowers the hospital bed with the remote control and puts her just at crotch level, so that even though she's lying prostrate in bed and missing some limbs, she can still put out her hand to give him a tug. Right. And so he can continue to just grimace about
you just use her to gratify himself and complain. I'm just like, yeah.
And she's doing that because she needs Homelander to be the poster boy for her Aryan Nation, agenda, and is trying to continue to curry his favor and still be relevant, and for him to keep her alive.
Uh-huh.
And she's trying to do some sort of duty, and then he doesn't finish. He can't go through with it because she ruins the moment with all the Aryan talk.
She was too much of a Nazi for him.
That was hysterical.
No, that's too much.
And he's literally just like, no, stop it. It's funny. There's a moment where we all identify with Homelander that we're just like, yo, stop with this Nazi shit. Chill out, B.
I'm not into that.
You hate him in every regard, but when he says that, there's a moment where you're just like, thank you.
He's about himself. He's not about the Nazis.
That whole interaction between two awful people was hysterical, because he's awful and then she reminds you about why she's so awful. It's two incompatible brands of awful. And that's just great.
Yeah. It's so much yuck. It's hilarious.
No, that was awful.
Savon, you wrote this question. The boys seems to be taking a lot of shots or makes references to current real world social media, social justice ideas. Some they're getting into a little bit around brutality by police and law enforcement, ending, racism. There's certainly talks about drugs and their effects in the drug war. And I think that's going to come actually more in episode 2 and 3 than it does in episode 1. But is that stuff working within the context of the show? Savon, did you have any thoughts on that? Because actually, I don't think it's as apparent in episode 1. Episode 1 is really just the grab you by the cojones episode. So the only thought I thought I think in episode 2, A-Train makes a pitch, and we can talk about that.
So here's an interesting thing about The Boys. And again, this is something that makes The Boys distinct from actually any other superhero, really anything I've consumed, the more I think about it, including Invincible. The Boys, and I say this more so about the show than the comic. The comic doesn't do this at all, and I rake them across the coals for it because the comic's awful. But the show does this really well of, and I hate to even use the word woke because people use it as a pejorative just for talking about just discrimination in general.
Yeah.
But The Boys does a really good job of not erasing history. I think that's a better way of putting it, right? Maybe it's not them having an agenda, so to say. Some people might interpret it that way of, we have to talk about, racism and all these things and, internet fake news, that kind of stuff, and social media. But they do it in a way that's, I don't think they're trying to make a right or wrong point, but they're not going to pretend that this isn't a real thing. Even A-Train, right? Trying to rebrand and lean into his more into his Black roots. That's not that's a shot at people who clearly try to tokenize themselves for profit and stuff. But it's not really you'll see more with his story. It's not really this is right or wrong. It's just saying hey, in this world, these are things that happen, that can and will happen. And I appreciate that because it adds a bit of authenticity. Or, there's references to, I'll say, there's a conversation that A-Train has when he's back in his neighborhood with with a family member, and they make a reference to something that's a police brutality reference involving soups. And part of me wants to say, it feels ham-fisted, but the other part is is it? Or is this just a real thing that happens in real life, and this is what it looked like in a world like this? And maybe you're only uncomfortable because you want these things to be erased and not talked about. The show doesn't erase history when it's relevant to things happening with the plot. So, even in previous seasons, they talk about the drug war, they talk about racism, sexism, they talk about even having to work with people, like there's a lot of stuff about sexual assault and the Deep's entire thing. Like people forget the Deep's whole story starts with him trying to assault Starlight, right? Like the show does a good job of just not pretending these real world things that happen don't happen. And it's very easy for shows like even Marvel when they try, it's very easy to just ignore that dynamic altogether because it can make people uncomfortable.
I think the show is not, you walk down the fine line of like, oh, you do these horrible things, whether they're racial violence or sexual assault or whatever, and then it just becomes part of the show and nobody like criticizes it, right? It just sort of becomes entrenched in the show. They don't do that here, right? That all of the, like, whenever they've had the women talk about like sexual assault, like you get a sense like how traumatizing it is for them, even if the perpetrators don't see it that way, right?
Yeah.
So it's important that the show does that as well. It can't just be like, oh, like we're just gonna have this gratuitous
we're gonna show awful
sex
things, which the comic was 100% guilty of. Like it was just gratuitous and didn't make a point. The show, they're better about it, but yeah, the big thing is like they don't whitewash. They basically, when they're referring to history and things that happen, they don't whitewash things at all. And again, like Wes, we're talking about like Japanese internment, right? Like so many movies that talk about World War II and all that, Japanese internment never comes up, and it's just it's a very subtle form of whitewashing. That's just like, hey, if you're going to talk about this time period or these events, give a holistic picture of it. You don't have to go in with an agenda necessarily, but they take into account there's a lot of perspectives and people who've been influenced by it. And, I think you'll see in some of these later episodes, The Boys is getting really good about that, which, again, it doesn't even feel like a superhero show anymore. It feels like a revenge drama that just has people with powers in it, not the other way around.
All right. So let's go ahead and start wrapping up our conversation around The Boys. Do you have any big predictions for where this show is going? I mean, it's so bonkers that like it's really hard to have bold predictions, but if you have any, now's the time to drop them in. Brian, do you have any predictions?
They already had the biggest prediction in episode 1. I feel like in the rest of the season, like that's only going to be 1 up, 2 up, 3 up more. So I'm expecting another really, really wild set piece in the latter half of the season that is just going to, I don't know. I think it's going to be one of those things that will become a calling card for the boys. Like, remember when the boys went there? They're going to go there somehow. And I imagine it's going to involve Homelander really, really going off his chair, right? We've already seen it happen. We've been constantly talking about how menacing he is, with other members of the Seven. Who knows what he's going to do? I think at some point, all of that's going to come to a head where, I think he's probably going to get confronted by a lot of the supers and also people with new superpowers, courtesy of V24. And there will be some sort of, all out wild thing where we're left with a lot of exploded bodies. That's what I'm imagining.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bold prediction to say there's going to be more exploded bodies, but that's 100% where they're going to go with this show. This show is ridiculous. I mean, it's just so absurd, like the way that all these bodies get exploded. I mean, in episode 1, we see a body whose like neck and jaw is exploded. But their eyes are still like a little bit alive just for like a few moments, but they're like,
to drive the point home of you're dead, like, you're dying,
leaking.
But you're here.
Yeah, like you can see like the blood still pulsing. Like, whew, good times.
This show is the weird kid in high school who everyone is like, wow, what a weirdo. And they walk to the beat of their own drum, but everyone respects it because they know who they are.
Yeah.
It's like, are you like, is this the kid you super cool with? No, but you respect like, hey, they know where they're at. Yeah. Compared to, other shows that are so busy trying to be so many different things, and it's like, oh, you're just trying to appease whoever you think will.
Yeah, you're trying to be the cool kid.
trying to be the cool kid, not just like be yourself. Just be yourself.
Yeah, Book of Boba Fett.
The Boys is being itself. Let's be very clear about that. So if you haven't checked it out yet and you enjoy season 1 and 2, season 3 so far has been just way more over the top even than it already was, I think. But still, it's been a strong show. I haven't been able to look away. I'm actually excited to continue to watch this show. I wasn't looking forward to it. Seeing the first episode, I was like, man, like I actually do want to keep watching this. This is going places. The amount of tension that is building is good. Homelander as that source of tension in a bunch of different directions, and introducing the Congresswoman at the end of last year and her being part of this is really interesting. And there's now a bunch of different factions. There's like the government side of it. There's the super side of it, but the soups are like split up into different sides. There's what's his name? Giancarlo Esposito, is that his name?
Yeah, Stan
Gustavo.
Edgar.
Stan Edgar, his role is very different, right? He's obviously coming from like a more corporate side, but he clearly has a great presence and gravitas whenever he's in a scene. And he's just like, I don't give a crap about like Homelander. He's not the threat to me, right? Like, and how is that possible? Like, this dude could just melt you. That's an incredible amount of threat that he just doesn't seem to care about. So I'm interested to see like how they leverage that and how they use his strengths throughout the show.
Yeah, man. I don't know. Right now, we're going to be on 3 seasons of just Homelander being a ticking time bomb where you wonder, like, yo, so when is he just going to, like, just snap and just fully send it? He still hasn't done that for 3 seasons now. And somehow they still managed to keep the show engaging. Like, you would think, all right, bro, like, this has been like a standoff of him about to flip out for years now. When is he going to actually flip out? And I don't know. Is this the season? Maybe. He's pretty, from what I've seen so far, I feel like it could be, but who knows? This show does a really good job of using plot to subdue powerful characters who otherwise break power scaling, a.k.a. Homelander, who could, end the world, but still just has a bunch of checks that stop that from happening. Specifically, his pathological desire to be loved.
Yeah. His mommy issues.
Well, but he's losing a bunch of his tethers right now. Well,
exactly.
So yeah, he loses one of his tethers in this show, or in one of these recent 2 first episodes. The lady who was in charge of Vought is no longer around. She was a great source of I don't know, love for him or whatever. But
that was his like handler. She was manipulating him when he was young. Like,
and we know that Stanley Edgar is trying to phase all of them out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, everything's going to come to a head.
An exploding head. Okay. Our second segment of the day, Highbrow, Hi Brian. Brian, you're bringing us some kind of content or things we should be into, as we're just the plebeians, but you're coming in with a sense of, I don't know what to call it. What would you call it? A sense of taste, sophistication.
Gentlemen, sometimes there are finer things in life that one must experience. And I have descended from my perch above the clouds to bestow this upon all of you and your sophomore tastes to try to elevate them.
Did use the word sophomore.
Right?
This is no longer confidently wrong because I'm confidently right about all of this. So, in this segment of Highbrow, Hi Brian, I wanted to talk about a sci-fi show that maybe not a lot of people are watching, but have heard about, but should be watching on Apple TV Plus, a service.
Sixth place service.
None of us use. However, I have recently started my free trial so I could watch this show. And it was worth every free $99 I spent. For Severance. The show Severance.
Oh, okay. From
our friend Ben Stiller of Zoolander fame, who is a director and key executive producer of this show. And he's done a phenomenal, incredible job. He has so much.
Is he acting or is he directing?
He's directed most of the episodes. He's executive producing.
But he's not an actor or appeared in it?
He does not appear in the show whatsoever. He has really shown that he is a top-notch creative through and through, right? Like he do this. He can jump in from any genre and get it done properly, and with utmost skill and craft. And so Severance is actually a sci-fi show, which is another reason why I think it's important that we discuss it here on the podcast.
I thought it was about losing your job.
Severance is actually, it's a workplace show. I mean, in a way, it's about losing your job, right? So it features Adam Scott, who we know from Parks and Rec, Leslie Knope's boyfriend.
Love him.
Great actor in this, particularly making use of his doughy like office vibes. And so he plays a worker at a big tech company called Lumen. And at Lumen, they have new technology that allows employees, if they elect, to be severed. And what that means is that they insert something into their brain that severs their consciousness between their personal lives, their personal self, and their work self, so that every time they take the elevator to go into the basement where Adam Scott works, his work self turns on and his personal self turns off, so that he, in the working environment, in his office, that work person only knows the work world. They know their name. They know general facts about the world. They have, their general motor skills and everything, but they don't know anything. They don't know. They have no personal memories. They have no history. None of that. They just have their personality. And so that they can go and do their rote job in a cubicle in this windowless basement labyrinth of an office at this giant med tech or biotech company. And then when he takes the elevator at 5 o'clock every day, he switches back to his personal life and has a normal suburban life that is completely unaffected by the work environment that, he just committed 8 hours to. And so Severance is about that separation, that bifurcation, if you will, between
I'm
our
using the
work
big dog
selves.
words.
Yeah, I'm trying to get you.
This is real work-life balance, though.
So yes, it's essentially taking work-life balance to an extreme, and the show executes at such a high level. It's truly a pitch perfect show. From the cinematography, where every frame is a painting, it's artfully composed and very carefully, precisely shot, so that you don't get some random camera movement or just like people milling about. Everybody is situated precisely in a framed way. They use all the lines from The Office to frame people up. They use the labyrinth corridors really well. And there's twists and turns that is always showing you just enough and just what you need to know and sets the mood, always tickling the eye. The acting and performances are stellar. You got these, great Adam Scott, who's carrying the whole thing. But then you have people like John Turturro, Christopher Walken, Patricia Arquette, who are doing these idiosyncratic performances with their side characters. You've got all the quirky humor that you might expect from Ben Stiller, like some laughable things happening in the way that the office selves treat The Office, right? They're like hallowed about The Office. They quote The Office handbook like it's biblical scripture, and it's just silly.
They're like robots.
Exactly. They're automatons, essentially. And so they got all this quirky humor, but at the same time, this show really is a thriller. It's a psychological thriller because, as you might expect, human automatons at some point are not happy, right? And so this show is about the workplace and the working environments, and we all have a work self. We are being dehumanized, and in this show, they're literally dehumanized by that working environment. And so throughout the course of the season, things come together and all those automatons try to take control in their own hands because they realize, like, hey, you know what? There's a life out there. We exist and we deserve more. So it's really interesting on that level. And so watching the show, I was so refreshed by it because it's really unique and original, but also because it's been a while since I've seen a science fiction show like this that just like felt really prescient. Of course, is well executed and all of that. It's finely crafted, but it's also got that extra bit of juice that makes it so much more interesting than other sci-fi that I've been consuming. And it made me think, why? Like, why is that? Like, what is it that makes sci-fi not just good, but really great and memorable? And so, gentlemen, I want to present to you my grand theory about what makes a good sci-fi great. And I'm going to present
unifying theory of sci-fi.
I'm going to present 3 tenets that I've learned from Severance that I think are applicable to some of our greatest sci-fi out there.
Okay.
And so one, and perhaps the most important tenet, and by the way, I'm calling this tenet in honor of the movie Tenet, another great sci-fi. So new technology or scientific discovery has to be at the core of the plot. And it can't just be a detail in the world that the show exists in. So, you know, like a FTL drive happening in the show, sure, that's science fictional, but that is not the core thing that show is about, right? Where, you know, their FTL exists. That's a detail. On a show like Severance...
FTL, is that faster than light?
Faster than light, exactly.
Okay.
Or warp speed, right? Just because like warp speed exists in the show does not mean that that's what the technology or the science, that's not at the core of the plot. In Severance, it really is about being severed. And there are people in the outside world, outside of the office workspace, who are up in arms about this technology existing. And so there's a real conflict in the real world about, you know, what this means for everybody. And then, you know, if you think about other great sci-fi, if you think about like Inception, the idea of Inception is really at the core of that movie. Like they are harnessing Inception. They're showing you this technological advancement and what it means for everything else that happens in that story.
Blade Runner is the same.
Blade Runner is the same with replicants. And so,
Avatar?
Is Avatar great sci-fi? Questionable.
No,
I'm
but
thinking about the technology being like the core.
The technology is at the core. Yeah.
I like this tenet, though. I like it a lot.
It's at the core of the plot, and a corollary to my first tenet, it changes a world that we know or at least can understand. So
wait, but this sort of would you say then that like Star Trek fits into here?
Sort of.
Right? Like Star Trek
so it's sort of a world we understand. So Star Trek is a space. So I might actually say Star Trek might be a space exploration show. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily about some new technology. They do make discoveries. Right. So like I think like the individual episodes of Star Trek are really great sci-fi because usually in those episodes there's a discovery, right? There's a planet or something. They learn about the Borg function in some sort of way, and it changes how we understand the world or society. And so that, to me, that's important, right? So it's got to be like at the core of the plot and changes, you know, how we understand the world. And so Dune as a counterexample, you know, like, I don't know, you could argue that spice is like the new scientific discovery or whatever in that, but it doesn't really change the world that we can know, right? That exists in its own sort of, you know, fantasy realm. Like to me, that is kind of more of a fantasy epic than core sci-fi. So like I think that's a key thing here.
All right.
And then because it changes the world that we can understand, it has implications for how society is organized and asks then and thus begs questions about how our own real world society functions. So in Severance, obviously, right? Like they're changing the work the severed procedure is changing the work dynamic, and it's forcing people to confront questions about work-life balance. And so that's asking questions about our real selves, right? Like we all know that there's office Savon. Well, actually, you guys don't really work in offices, right? So maybe
no. There's definitely work Savon in private citizens Savon for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Bust your ass, Savon. That's the
there's Savon Jones and there's Captain Vonnie.
Yeah. There's
Hey.
hi, how can I help you today? And yo, what's happening with you? Yo, what's good? Let's get it.
There's serious code switching like all
Absolutely.
the time.
Yeah, but this tenet holds true for a lot of different genres in that their ability to hold up a magnifying glass to our own society is really important and really is the strength of those genres. So I think you're right. Like fantasy does this really well, right? In that casting different races or different species as actually allegories for our current situations around race, especially in America, but across the world. And we talk about what was it like, Southern Hemisphere nations, I don't know, developing South, right? Like whatever nomenclature we're using now. It's all of those things. District 9 holds up this this mirror or a lens through for us to kind of examine ourselves without maybe the discomfort and shutting down that we have around our current day perceptions around race, when all of a sudden we talk about like black people and white people or Asian folks or native folks. Like people already like have preconceptions and they sort of already entrench themselves, whereas new works of fiction can create these categories and you don't have any of those preconceptions already.
Fire Nation bad, United States Empire good. It's like for some people you gotta show them, if you make it an allegory, it's more which I guess to your point, Brian, saying with like the Avatar Airbender series, right? Bending is like such a fundamental part of their world that it drives everything that happens, and that's part of what makes it good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like this framework a lot, man. This is a really like. This is making me appreciate a lot of stuff like, oh, yeah, that did work. Because you're right. It changes the status quo of that world. It just fundamentally is different, but still familiar.
Yes, absolutely. It needs to be familiar. And actually, I think some of the greatest sci-fi like the closer it is to our actual lived experience, the more, the more impressive, the better the sci-fi gets. And the sci-fi aspect, I think, is really the chaser to some of that analysis. But I think the one key nuance of my second tenet about society, though, is that whatever that new technology or scientific discovery that's introduced in the show or movie or writing or whatever, is the thing that changes the society in context of that sci-fi. So like what's a good example? I'm trying to think. Sorry, I'm having a like serious brain fart right now. You can cut this out. But anyway, so that's the second tenet. Has implications for society, but then it's got to go one level deeper, just like Inception, right? And so what elevates it again is that whatever that new technology or scientific discovery is that is driving the whole series or show or whatever, it's also not just ask a societal question about how we organize our societies, but it's also got to have the metaphysical question. And so the metaphysical question is, something about, something philosophical that is kind of unanswerable, right? So like in Severance, it is, if we turn off our histories, right, and our basically our everything that makes us into who we are we still a person? Are we still human? Do we still exist? And thus have all the things that humans ought to have, right? Let's say in the Matrix, right? Like one of the biggest questions is, if I'm a battery for the singularity, essentially, if a human is a battery for the singularity, like the bigger question is, well, what is it that makes us human? Is it the free will to have all those experiences, or are the imagined experiences enough? Is blissful ignorance better? Also, another question that the Matrix raises: is everything a simulation? Like, can we still like be who we are if we just if everything that we're experiencing isn't even out there? It doesn't even exist, right? So like those bigger questions really can help catapult a good sci-fi into becoming a great sci-fi. And those questions have to really like come from whatever that new tech or discovery is. Oh, another great one, Minority Report. That was the one that I was looking for before. Minority Report. If we know that something is going to happen in the future, do we have any free will? Right? And then also, like, what sort of responsibility do we have if we already know it's going to happen, to prevent it? So interesting questions like that. And then in that world, they organize society around that ability. Yeah.
It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, classic, great sci-fi. So I feel like, if what makes something good, great, these 3 tenets from yours truly. So next time you're watching, look out for them. And you'll like start to realize like, oh yeah, this sci-fi is good. This sci-fi is real good because it is ticking all the boxes, right? Another great example, Her.
Top Gun, the original.
Terrible example. So
New tech,
the movie
fighter jets.
No.
Changes the world as we understand it, right? Air superiority has implications for how society is organized, right? Should the bullies always get to be the top dogs, or can the underdog win? Metaphysical questions. What do we do when our best friend dies? Like, do they still exist? Can they still influence our actions? Done. Best sci-fi.
Awful.
Are you just shilling? Are you just shilling for the U.S. military? Did they just send you a check that you just held for yourself for that plug?
Also,
Talk to me, Goose.
To take your example seriously, the movie does not address how those fighter jets actually change the world order. We do not see that on screen.
It's true.
It doesn't happen.
Sure.
At all. But I will say, I was going to say Her, great classic sci-fi about AI and a Siri-like device that goes above and beyond to really understand the human that they're working for. Completely changes society, and how
is that Scarlett
our character
Johansson?
functions. That's Scarlett Johansson. Great voice choice for an AI, and
it actually is
raises some serious questions about personhood and our interpersonal relationships. Like, is that actually what makes a relationship good? Just an algorithm knowing us really, really damn well and delivering on all the things that we know that we want? Is that all the interpersonal relationship is? So
just beat me and hug me and we good.
Yeah.
They've cracked the code, damn it.
we are mammals at heart.
Just whatever tickles that little caveman part of my brain.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, are there any things you want to add, Brian or Savon, to our Hi Brian Severance on Apple TV Plus? We're going to advertise for it right now. Go see it. Go see Adam Scott be pitch perfect, as Brian said. And shout out to my sister Alexis, who has been trying to get me to watch this show for a while now. I've just been really busy, and I got rid of my Apple TV Plus a while ago, so I need to hop back on that over the summer. But she has been on this one, Brian. So you and her are on the same wavelength here.
She's a connoisseur of good taste.
Yeah. What'd you say, Savon?
Codify your tenets, Brian. Got to get those in writing. We got to make sure we put that in stone so we can send it out to the people on the social media.
Right. I need an R with a circle.
I'm saying.
I need the TM on this.
Yeah, put the trademark that joint. I'm saying it's a confidently wrong exclusive.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and end our show there. So we definitely got into The Boys Season 3. Hi Brian. Talked about Severance. Upcoming on some new shows that we have planned for you. We're going to get into Ms. Marvel, which is dropping on Disney Plus here in just a little bit. And, hopefully we'll have our fourth Kyrie Irving, Mike Smith appearance. We'll have him back on the show. So it'll be good.
Can't wait to have
Let's make him a feature.
Featuring
FT period. Mike Snow.
It's like a Wayne feature. He's got to be like the rappers on the song where there's like a sound effect and he has.
Hey, but the features are the way to go. That's how you get paid.
Exactly.
That's how you get paid.
He could be the Rick Ross of Confidently Wrong. He just comes by, does Andre 3000, just comes by, do a hot verse, and then we don't see him for like 5 years.
Just leave him wanting more.
Mike,
as far as I know, we're not getting paid to do this, so I don't know if we can afford a feature at this point.
Metaphorical dollars.
We'll see if we can afford Mike's feature rate.
Mike, we love you, but we miss you. Also, stop planning weddings around, our podcast or when we do our podcast.
It's a cry for help, Mike. We miss you.
Laters. Bye. At confidently_pod Instagram. Hit us up. Talk to Savon. He'll talk back at you. Promise. Bye.